Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2025 is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode.
Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me today is Meike Bettscheider. Meike is a global leadership coach, strategist, and founder of Compass Setting, where she guides leaders, entrepreneurs, and organizations through times of uncertainty and transformation. With an executive MBA from Chicago Booth and an executive master's in change from INSEAD, Meike has spent her career leading across continents in high-stakes roles before launching her own practice, dedicated to authentic leadership and crisis resilience. At Compass Setting, she helps leaders realign with their true values, strengthen resilience, and turn obstacles into milestones. Her unique approach integrates epigenetic coaching, psychophysiology, that is, face reading, and 24/7 resilience support, tools that allow her clients to cut through complexity and navigate with clarity. Meike describes herself as a compass for her clients, steady, precise, and always pointing towards authenticity. Her career journey includes establishing a global foundation branch supporting 71 countries, serving as VP of Business Development across EMEA, and currently delivering results in demanding environments. She empowers leaders worldwide from her base in Greece, drawing on psychological frameworks, cross-cultural experience, and the discipline of martial arts. She's a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo. Meike believes the future of leadership isn't about more technology or process, but about human-centered leadership rooted in authenticity, resilience, and meaning. Her mission is simple yet profound: to transform challenges into strategic opportunities and help leaders thrive when the path feels unclear. And I am truly pleased and delighted to have her here today with me on the podcast. Good morning, Meike. How are you?
Good morning, John, and thank you so much for having me and your kind introduction.
Oh, you're almost welcome. I'll send you a copy. You can always post it on your refrigerator. It's perfect. It's right. So people come in and they'll say, wow. Anyway, let's start out with a little personal note. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? And what were some of the early influences in your life?
I'm happy to do those. I'm originally German, so I grew up in Germany. I always wanted to become a doctor. I wanted to help people, and that was always my passion. And I chose a different career path from finance, banking, marketing, studies, but always on the side of it, I was helping people, or I worked for an international NGO, or I was working in social entrepreneurship. So values and value-driven entrepreneurship was always close to my heart through that childhood desire of helping people.
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, it is where you feel the warmth in your soul, which gets you and says, maybe you should take this path.
Yeah.
Let you describe yourself as a compass for your clients, helping them navigate uncertainty and set direction. What does it actually look like when someone is lost in leadership? And how do you help them find their true north again?
Mm. Thank you for asking me. It's pretty simple. So I want to help them find themselves and not needing me anymore very soon. So that's my passion. Being a compass means to let them find their inner strength and creating awareness actually about their strengths, and then fit or match their leadership style around that, which makes it feel easier and be more successful.
You talk a lot about the concept of authenticity. I can't tell you how many podcast guests I've had on here. We talk about authenticity. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on authenticity, vulnerability that enables authenticity. I'd love to get your perspective on that.
I hear these words a lot, and they tend to become buzzwords: vulnerability, authenticity, be yourself, even on a coffee mug. I ask myself, do we really know who we are? Actually, let's start there, right? And to be honest, it's a process, and a never ending process. And I think it's very important to be yourself. Let's not call it authentic. A lot of leaders are afraid of being themselves because we all have masks, we all have roles, especially also women, but also men. They think vulnerability or being themselves is a weakness. No, it's not. Because if you're aligned with your strengths, you're automatically become authentic. The people around of you feel you, your team, your stakeholders, and it's much easier to have negotiations, to have the ripple effect on your team because they feel you. We are all human, and I think it's very important to create trust, to be yourself. And people, they feel it if you're yourself or if you're playing a role.
I absolutely agree. I mean, the way I describe it is trust is the fuel that runs the engine of every relationship.
Yeah.
If you don't have trust, you have nothing.
Yeah.
It's the power. And yet I absolutely agree with you. I've witnessed this. I can't tell you how many times. So many people are afraid to be themselves. And I think you pointed to something, and I want to go back to that. They don't know who they are. They're trying to be something else, almost this imposter syndrome kind of a concept. I want to be this. I want to look like this. I want to sound like this. But the question is, what's really in your heart? What's in your soul that people can connect to? People
Yes.
connect to that kind of a thing, and they're motivated by that because it motivates them to be honest and true to themselves as well. Oh, the boss is really of just an authentic person, really out there. You get what you see. You see what you get. That kind of a thing. I think it's so important for people to accept their humanity. I know how difficult that is, especially in this world driven by so much social media. I'm on the same page with you, no question about it. I want to get to this term, which I think is very interesting. You emphasize, and I hope I get the term right, it's called prosilience. Did I say that right?
Yes.
The idea of building resilience proactively rather than reactively. What are some of the most practical ways leaders can build that mindset before crisis hits?
I personally believe that if you know yourself, if you know your strengths, then you know how to handle crisis. I create the awareness, and also maybe their strength they don't use in their leadership role or they don't have to use, but they can use it as a resource to fill up their energy if crisis hits. Maybe playing music or an instrument or reading or journaling or whatever they might not need in their position, but they can regain energy through it. Pointing that out and evaporating wrong beliefs, pointing at blind spots makes every person stronger more confident, and that builds up prosilience before the wave hits you. And I believe that gives us more power. We can do something instead of something happens, we have to react. That always puts us in a challenging position.
I'll tell you, I am going to use that term, and I'll tell you why, which struck me. I have been very blessed with the people that have been on my podcast. I've had guests from all over the world, and several of them, in fact, my 100th podcast episode, I highlighted these people, 7 people that were on. All 7 had been through very difficult, complex times in their lives, homelessness, prison, who are now leaders in their respective fields, artificial intelligence, for example, marketing. And it caused me to adjust my own viewpoint about hiring. So I tell people the first thing you should look for are values. Hire for values. And then the term I use that would connect to prosilience is hire for heart. Hire for people who have perseverance, who've been through very difficult times, who understand what it takes to move past the fog and know that the sun is going to shine, but they have to take responsibility for themselves. I had one guest who was in prison 3 times, and he told me the first 2 times didn't stick. It was the 3rd time that he said, then I realized it was up to me to make a difference. It was up to me to take responsibility for my own life. And now he's a leader in the AI community, CEO of a company. And you sit back and say, wow, there's the message right there. We're so involved today in getting skills. We need more AI skills. We need to get these skills and those skills. Before you go there, I'd be looking for values myself. Because if you want that person to stay in your company for 5 or maybe 6 years, values alignment is important. And that's what people are looking for. That's number one. They want to work for an organization with the values that they have. So there's got to be this connectivity. I absolutely agree with you. And I'd love to get your further reflection on that. It could.
I agree to what you said 100%. And I think that's also the future, the value-driven hiring process, but also value-driven working ethics. So that I don't look for a job which brings me that money, this money. Of course, we all need to live somewhere and to eat, of course. And at the same time, the prevention of burnout, being not successful, is to find a position, a job where you are fulfilled. And that's very close, from my perspective, with your values. Sometimes I find it interesting. We all know the word value, but if you ask people, what are your 3 biggest, most important values? They ask, what do you mean? They have to think. Then I ask, okay, how do you live them? You don't have to answer, but just compare it for yourself. Do you live your values in your job and in your personal life? Because it's an intersection. So I think it's very, very important in the future.
I agree with you completely. It's absolutely right on the money. My theme this year is meaning is the new money. And the idea, if someone can gather meaning or take meaning from the things they do every day, whether at work or someplace else, some, as you say, play music perhaps, or whatever, that fills their soul. It makes everything right. In terms of work, when you provide meaning for people, give them the opportunity to gain meaning from what they do, burnout dissipates. I don't care how hard I have to work. This is giving me a connection to not only to the work, but to myself as well. And I'd love to get your idea on that. What do you think about meaning as opposed meaning in a sense as it connects to burnout?
Oh, it's huge. I think it totally connects to it or prevents burnout. Last week, I had a conversation with a couple of CEOs, and the question was, what do you think about work-life balance? And the first person to answer, very high-level CEO, he said, oh, you're talking to the wrong person because I don't have any work-life balance. And at the same time, I don't need it because I love my job and I love what I'm doing. I feel the responsibility for my people and I don't mind. My wife is working with me, so I have the backup from the family. If I travel around time zones and on planes, I take a bike and go or in a gym for 1 hour bike, and then it's fine. I'm agreeing to it because if you love what you do, people are asking me, how can you do 24/7 crisis management? You're really available 24/7 for a couple of people, for a couple of clients, because I love it. I can't stop at 5 p.m. anyways because I'm thinking, how are they doing? I go through the situations with them, even though they're not talking to me, because I do what I love.
Yeah,
So
I
coming back to burnout, it's the same like work-life balance. It makes totally sense. Meaning is key.
it's a great way to describe it. I've had two guests on that talked about coaches, work-life balance, and both of them said, that doesn't exist. And I said, well, how do you reconcile it in your mind? And they go, work-life integration. Work-life integration, because there are times you're called upon to go above and beyond, or you want to be there for your clients, or there's a big task ahead and you have to really dive into that and put all your efforts into it, only sometime down the road to take a step back and say, okay, now I can change my direction here for an hour in the gym, or go for a bike ride in the country to clear my head, those kinds of things. And I think that hits it right on the money. When it's time to do the job, you do the job. But it's time to take a step back. One of the women that I interviewed has 4 children. So she needed, there's a lot of other stuff going on in her life, Dr.
Yeah.
Proclar. And she was great. And she really made me take a step back and think about that. And I think that's absolutely right on the money. Create meaning, you drive away burnout. It's a simple equation. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Oh, I want to talk to you about this. It's my new big thing. I talk a lot about moving from what I refer to as lighthouse leadership, where everything depends on one heroic figure, the leader. The leader as lighthouse, navigating troubled waters. I believe in another metaphor, the constellation of leadership, where strength is shared and scalable. How does your work help shift people or organizations to this more resilient, interconnected model? So let me explain this. The leadership model that I started developing over 30 years ago is based on one premise, and that's contribution. The idea is we have a problem, we have an issue in the organization. Who would like to stand up and help? Who has an idea? Who has a thought? Opening the door up to other contributions so that we talk about authenticity, we talk about empathy as being almost possessed only by the leader is lighthouse. But when I look at the constellation, I'm looking to move empathy and authenticity from a trait to a value that's shared amongst the group. So that if the leader leaves, we continue on. I would love to get your reflection on that idea and any thoughts that you have.
Thank you for sharing. And I love the rephrasing. And I, again, 100% agree to what you're saying. And I believe leadership is more like stewardship, to really be a role model, because leaders have responsibility. They have to carry that, also share that when it's too much, or ask for help and support, which comes then to authenticity, and to foster, encourage their team. And I think the premise is to let go of the ego, because that helps a lot. And there's connection, because you need other people and everyone has different perspectives. I love when leaders come together once a month, every 3 months, in a crisis every day or every week, whatever the term is or will be. Was working with great leaders from a very successful company, and they even asked, they said, let the cleaning lady in. What perspective do they have? Because they're so off. We are so caught up in our terminology, in our problems, in our industry, in our vocabulary. Explain it easily. Try to explain the problem easily and ask everyone. And that gives the feeling of belonging. And belonging is also extremely important in our days, from my perspective. And to also foster that belonging demands sharing, being authentic, being vulnerable, and also saying, hey, I don't have the solution. Let's share. Bring it all on the table and decide together. There is no blaming and shaming afterwards either, because everyone wants to get that ship through the storm. I think that's very important.
It's funny you should say that. I think that's absolutely right. I remember when I worked in organizations, one of the groups I would traditionally get close to or tap into their resource were the administrative people, the secretaries, the admin assistants, because they see the world from a completely different perspective. They see the other side of it. And they always gave me a wonderful perspective to understand not only what the decisions were, but how those decisions were being made by telling their stories. I absolutely agree. And I think one of the things you mentioned, and I'll talk about it because I think this is so important, is this notion of belonging. How many times have I seen people say, I want people to feel like they belong? My response is no, that's not the right response. What you really is you want them to know they belong. And the way they know they belong is because of the second principle that I talk about all the time. And that is people want to be involved in the decision-making processes of the organization. People want to matter. They want their work to matter. People want to have a level of control and autonomy over their destinies. And I like to say, people want to be masters of their own fate. And once we provide them the opportunity to do that, say, hey, you matter here. Your ideas matter if you're the cleaning woman, that kind of idea. It just raises everything up. In another way, we had this, I was a former naval officer, and we had this saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the tide to come in and raise all boats. Anything further, I'd love to hear from you on that.
You're totally right. And I think it's something in between the lines to create that feeling other people have that they belong. These can be gestures. And to be honest, we all want to be seen and heard. That's totally valid. And that can be through little gestures, bringing them on the table to ask and remembering they have kids. Connection, communication, that's key. It's critical.
I wanted to ask you this question because I've had several people who've been on the podcast who are martial artists.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, you hold a black belt in Taekwondo. How has your martial arts discipline influenced the way you approach executive coaching and leadership development?
It helps me a lot because to get to the second black belt, you fall a lot. You have bruises. And when you think you got it in the right hand, your master tells you, okay, now we train the other side because it has all to be even. So you start again. And it's a holistic approach because you can't overthink. You have to be focused and willing to stand up again and speak through your faults, your failures. And that also, it's not all about discipline because people are asking, oh, you must be very disciplined then. You're German and you do martial arts. No, discipline is one thing. right? You have to be disciplined as a leader, as a coach, of course. And at the same time, you have to learn to fall, but it's more about how you stand up again. And if you think you're great with the right side, then we train the left side so that you're ready or resilient for whatever comes.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, absolutely perfect sense to me. So I appreciate that very much. I have to ask, I'm very curious about this. In your practices, the leaders that you've worked with, you've worked with, I suspect, both men and women. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How would you characterize, if there is a difference, the difference between the men leaders and women leaders? What kind of issues would you say separate them in terms of the things that they struggle with?
I think in general, they all have the same struggles. The female ones may have a little bit more fear of being vulnerable or to show that they're vulnerable. That might be the difference, but the male either. I think both have challenges. I always see the person, and you can say they're great female leaders and they have children to manage as well. And there's always this gap between I want to be with my children and at the same time I want my career. But also men have some struggles in their private life. Sometimes they don't want to be the strongest when they have to be during the day.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I would, it's lonely at the top.
It's always lonely, and this is what they all have in common. And to who can you talk, actually? So it needs to be a sparring partner, I call it, more or less, a confident sparring partner, because we all have to let it out and to question our thoughts or be not weak, but be just how we are today without
Yeah,
any
I
insecurities.
I agree. It's difficult to be in that position and having and feeling as though everything is on you. Everybody is looking to you for guidance, thoughts, information, and knowledge. And I hope we can shift a good deal of that in this much more collaborative endeavor. I absolutely believe that we are now entering a period of unbelievable entrepreneurship, that there are going to be more people going out on their own or connecting with a group of people and creating maybe a 5 or 6 person group that provides a specific thing to the marketplace. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all those shifts are going to impact traditional organizations as well. Will the traditional organizations shift to a much more collaborative, open process? I think they're doing that, but I don't know if it's enough. Not in a world with AI. And I mean that in a bad way, but with AI coming in such an amazing capability. Let me ask you another question. In your work now, are you seeing effects of AI in terms of your coaching and in terms of your work? How do you use it? What are you seeing as the impact of AI in the workplace?
I see a lot of anxiety in the workplace about AI. Years ago, we wouldn't have thought about a smartphone. There's the need and the urge to have the knowledge to use it, and at the same time, not being afraid of it. And in my work, it helps me to be more efficient in preparations for workshops. And it doesn't make me not needed anymore because it's the human centered, the trust and safe space creation only a human being can do. It clicks or not. You need to look each other in the eyes. You need space for crying, screaming, whatever. And that only works with the person in front of you, even if it was a screen.
Right.
What is your experience about?
Well, I think you're right on the money. I'll tell you an interesting story. Several weeks ago, I was doing a presentation and putting PowerPoint slides together. I went to ChatGPT and I said, okay, here's the presentation. Here's the subject. Tell me what kind of slides I should use. And it came out and it had a very, nice thing. I threw it all away. I said, that's not me. That is not the way John, would deliver the message. I have to, good or bad, I've got to deliver it my way. I have to this is the way I build logic
Yeah.
into my presentation, and you're missing the boat. Right now, I have 4 subscriptions to 4 different AI systems: ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, and Google Gemini. And I use them together as a check and a balance on. So one might give me an output. I'll feed the prompt and the output into another one. And I say, well, what do you think?
Mhm.
I say, yeah, what do you think?
Right.
Because I says, well, there's similarities, but sometimes they're different. I'm still big with ChatGPT, but I really do like Claude. And I'll tell you why. The words I choose for Claude are elegance, sophistication. When it explains things, when it tries to give me its output, I just find that the words resonate more with me than just having words thrown at me. Not that the other models don't do a good job, they do a real good job. But for me, Claude is incredibly apropos for the way I would want to present information. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. There's my AI secrets, if you will. We're getting close to the end, so I'd like to ask you my last question, if that's okay. And that is, for Mikey,
Mhm.
what do you see in the future? What is your hope for the future? Where do you see Mikey and the future going together?
I hope that the leaders are being themselves and courageous enough, and that it's respected and expected from society that they're being more themselves, and being courageous for myself, that I can help as many leaders in their really tough work life, and it's coming up a lot of storms from my perspective, to help them create resilience and be there for them and with them.
Great. I hope you're right. And, I think you're right. Prosilience, the ability to understand that perseverance is should be a much sought after capability in people, because when things are not going well, these are the people who can rise up and help solve the problem. I'm with you 100%. Mikey, this has been an absolute delight. I can't thank you enough for your time today here on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I wish you the greatest success in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, John. It was a real pleasure talking to you and being on your podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.